Thomas Massie did what no one else in Congress has been willing to do. He stood up in a live hearing, looked FBI Director Kash Patel in the eye, and in less than 30 seconds turned a routine oversight session into the most uncomfortable moment Washington has seen in years. There was no build-up, no polite exchange, no easing into the confrontation. The opening alone froze the entire committee room. Cameras locked in, staffers stopped moving, even Patel's attorneys straightened in their chairs as if they could feel what was coming before the words left Massie's mouth.
Is entitled, What Epstein's Bodyguard Warned About His CIA Connections. The third document is from Fox Digital. It's titled, Epstein's Private Calendar Reveals Planned Meetings with Obama Admin Official CIA Chief. And the last document is Wall Street Journal article that highlights Ehud Barak's 36 meetings with Jeffrey Epstein. He was the former Prime Minister of Israel and head of military intelligence for Israel. It may have held that title when he met Epstein, and then, yes.
Without objection, the gentleman will hold for a second. The gentleman from Maryland is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just one UC request. This is Judge Engelmeyer's decision from August in U.S. versus Epstein, stating the government's 100,000 pages of Epstein files dwarfs the 70-odd pages of Epstein grand jury materials.
Without objection, the gentleman from Kentucky is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director Patel, I watched some of your Senate hearing yesterday when Senator Kennedy asked you, you've seen most of the files, who, if anyone, did Epstein traffic these women to besides himself? You replied, according to the transcript, there is no credible information that he trafficked them to anyone else. You also said somewhere in the hearing and here today that the problem is that the case files are constrained by limited search warrants from 2006 to 2007 and that the non-prosecution agreement hamstrung future investigations. Those constraints only apply to the Southern District of Florida. They do not apply to the Southern District of New York, the location of the 2019 sex trafficking indictment, which produced many things, including a series of FD 302 documents. According to victims who cooperated with the FBI in that investigation, these documents in FBI possession, your possession, detail at least 20 men, including Mr. Jess Staley, CEO of Barclays Bank, who Jeffrey Epstein trafficked victims to, victims including minors, such as Virginia Roberts Giuffre, may she rest in peace. That list also includes at least 19 other individuals, one Hollywood producer worth a few $100 million, one royal prince, one high-profile individual in the music industry, one very prominent banker, one high-profile government official, one high-profile former politician, one owner of a car company in Italy, one rock star, one magician, at least 6 billionaires, including a billionaire from Canada. We know these people exist in the FBI files, the files that you control. I don't know exactly who they are, but the FBI does. Have you launched any investigations into any of these people, and have you seen these 302 documents?
Sir, I have asked my FBI agents to review the entirety of the Epstein files and bring forth any credible information, and we're working with Congress not only to divulge that information and produce it to you, but any investigations that arise from any credible investigation will be brought. There have been no new materials brought to me launching a new indictment.
So is the loophole here, or is it your assertion that these victims aren't credible, that the 302s maybe didn't produce credible statements that rise to a probable cause?
It's not my assertion, sir. It's the assertion of two different United States attorneys' offices from 3 separate administrations who investigated those same materials in live time.
Are the 302 documents in the FBI's possession?
They reviewed all that, yes, sir.
And so have you reviewed those 302 documents where the victims name the people who victimized them?
If I personally know, but the FBI has.
So how can you sit here and in front of the Senate and say there are no names?
I said
I named one today.
I said we are not in the practice at the Department of Justice FBI of releasing victims' names. That is not what we do. We are also not in the habit of releasing incredible information. That's not what we do. But multiple authorities have looked at the entirety of what we have.
Okay, I got to move on here. Were you present when the AG had the White House event when she released the binders to the social media influencers?
I was, yes.
So if you're willing to meet with social media influencers who stood to benefit from the sensational and sad stories of these victims, will you meet with the victims as well?
The FBI will meet with anyone who has new information.
Will you personally meet with them?
The FBI and the professionals who are handling the cases will.
Were you instructed that it was important to release the documents to the Oversight Committee on the day of my introduction of the discharge petition to release these files?
I don't know what day that was, so no.
Well, they were released that day, and there were victims' names who weren't redacted because they were in such a rush, and the victims are not happy about that. Have you investigated any of the CIA connections? Have you seen the CIA file on Jeffrey Epstein? And if you wanted to see it, would they show it to you?
Well, I can speak for the FBI, and that's presuming there's a CIA case file. And I've reviewed everything that the interagency, not I, the FBI, that was provided to us.
Would you be willing to look at the CIA file on Jeffrey Epstein?
If there is such a file, and if it has not already been turned over to the FBI will look at any new investigative leads.
Have you made any progress on the pipe bomb investigation January 6th? And have you made any progress on the motive of the Las Vegas shooter?
As to the first, it's an ongoing investigation, and we have made progress.
Because this wasn't politics, this wasn't performance, this was a man walking directly into the one subject every powerful institution in America has quietly agreed not to touch: the Epstein files. Massie didn't raise his voice, he didn't posture, he simply began, calmly, deliberately, as if he had rehearsed every syllable the night before. And yet the impact of those first few sentences was so jarring, so unexpected, that within seconds you could sense the energy shift across the entire room. You could almost feel the question forming in the back of everyone's mind: is he really going there? Right here, right now? And the answer, which became clear almost instantly, was yes. He was going exactly there, and he wasn't stopping. It's important to understand the dynamic in that room before everything detonated. Congressional hearings, especially oversight sessions, tend to have a predictable rhythm: long speeches disguised as questions, carefully crafted talking points, officials deflecting, members pretending to press for answers while avoiding anything that would require real accountability. It's political theater. Everyone knows their role and plays it. Kash Patel walked in expecting that same script. He was relaxed, even confident, carrying the posture of someone who has survived dozens of these hearings and knows how to navigate every angle. The usual strategy: appear cooperative, say nothing meaningful, outlast the clock. But Massie wasn't there to participate in the script. He arrived with something else entirely: evidence preparation and a willingness to break the unspoken rule that protects names, agencies, and decisions nobody wants to see dissected on camera. The moment he opened that thick red folder, Patel's demeanor shifted, subtle but noticeable. A small tightening of the jaw, hands that had been resting easily on the table now pressing just slightly harder. Because Patel recognized it instantly, Massie hadn't come to speculate. He hadn't come to lob political grenades. He had come with documents, exact references, timelines, statements, records. And in Washington, the only thing more dangerous than a politician with a microphone is a politician with receipts. The first strike came fast. Massie introduced 4 documents into the congressional record, each one tied not to rumors, not to internet chatter, but to reporting that highlighted intelligence ties, high-level meetings, unexplained relationships, and years of unanswered questions. A former U.S. attorney saying he was told Epstein belonged to intelligence. A bodyguard describing strange agency connections, calendar entries showing Epstein meeting with high-ranking officials, intelligence leaders appearing repeatedly in Epstein's orbit. But Massie wasn't just making a point, he was constructing a trap. With each document he read aloud, he tightened the frame. He forced Patel to react not to theories but to facts, facts already public, already published, and already known. This set the stage for the question Patel couldn't avoid and absolutely couldn't answer cleanly, because when Massie pivoted to Patel's Senate testimony, the atmosphere snapped. He quoted Patel's statement back to him, "There is no credible information that Epstein trafficked victims to anyone else," and then with the precision of someone who knew exactly what the next domino would be, Massie contrasted that statement with the existence of FD 302 interview summaries. Not just any interview summaries, ones in the FBI's possession created during the 2019 investigation, containing witness statements pointing to at least 20 men. The room went still. This wasn't speculation, this wasn't internet theory disguised as fact. This was Massie referencing the FBI's own documents, its own interviews, its own case files, files Patel had just recently used to assure Congress nothing actionable existed. Then came the list, the 20 individuals, not by name, but by category. High-profile categories, exactly enough to frame the scale without violating any restrictions. A Hollywood producer worth hundreds of millions, a royal prince, a leading music industry figure, a major banker, a government official, a former politician, a car company owner, a rock star, a magician, and at least 6 billionaires, including one from Canada. It wasn't an accusation, it was a recitation of what witnesses had already told federal agents under formal interview, and that distinction changed everything. Because Massie wasn't claiming these people were guilty. He wasn't naming them. He wasn't alleging anything beyond what the FBI itself already possessed. Instead, he simply asked the one question that would expose the entire structure of avoidance surrounding this case. Have you launched any investigations into these individuals? Patel didn't answer. He couldn't. Not immediately. Not after what had just been laid out. And so the hearing fell into 20 seconds of complete, suffocating silence, the kind of silence that grabs every viewer by the throat and refuses to let go. It is almost impossible to describe how long 20 seconds feels in a congressional chamber. It is an admission, it is an indictment, it is the clearest form of truth a witness can offer without speaking. And when Patel finally answered, his voice carried something that hadn't been there before. A slight falter, a defensive edge. A man navigating territory he didn't prepare for. He insisted the issue wasn't the victim's credibility, but the position of past U.S. attorney offices. But Massie wasn't asking about credibility, he was asking about action, and Patel hadn't taken any. Then Massie pressed further, dismantling the core of Patel's prior statements. He asked a simple question, are the FD 302 documents in the FBI's possession? Patel hesitated before answering, yes. Next, have you reviewed them personally? Patel admitted he had not. That admission alone changed the trajectory of the conversation nationwide, because how could the director claim there were no names if he hadn't even read the documents containing the names? The contradiction didn't require analysis, it didn't require interpretation, it exposed itself. Massie didn't gloat, he didn't hammer the point, he simply let it sit, letting the audience draw its own conclusion. Either Patel had spoken without knowledge, or he had downplayed material he hadn't reviewed. There was no version where that answer strengthened his position, and then Massie detonated the moment that would dominate every news cycle, every social media feed, and every political discussion for the next 48 hours. He asked about the CIA. More specifically, he asked whether Patel had seen the CIA's file on Epstein, if such a file exists. That phrasing was deliberate. He didn't claim one existed, he implied the possibility, using Patel's answer to define the uncertainty. Patel's response was careful, too careful. He said he could speak for the FBI, not the CIA. He said if such a file existed, and if it hadn't already been turned over, the FBI would review it. It was not a denial, it was not confirmation, it was a sentence where every significant verb was conditional. Massie didn't need to push further. The impact was already complete. Once the possibility entered the record, once Patel answered without a clear rejection, the public conversation exploded. But Massie was not done. His final pivot was emotional, sharp, and devastating. He contrasted the FBI's willingness to meet with social media influencers, people who could amplify the agency's narratives, with their reluctance to meet directly with victims. He asked Patel personally if he would meet with them. Patel avoided the commitment. Massie repeated the question. Patel skirted it again. And in that exchange a new rift formed, not about documents, not about investigations, but about humanity. This was the moment that tore through the internet. Because it revealed something people have felt for years: the institutions in charge of justice are more comfortable managing optics than confronting pain, and Massie forced that reality into the open. By the time he yielded his time, the damage was complete. 5 minutes of questions had undone months of official statements. 5 minutes had placed 4 documents into the congressional record, referenced 20 unnamed individuals, referenced a possible CIA file, and exposed that the FBI director hadn't personally reviewed the critical material he was defending. Within minutes, clips from the hearing were everywhere. Headlines appeared mid-session. Analysts scrambled to interpret what the exchange meant. Legal commentators speculated on whether Massie had just crafted the foundation for future subpoenas, and ordinary viewers watched in disbelief as the unspoken rules surrounding the Epstein case cracked for the first time in years. And here's why this moment matters: not because it proves guilt, not because it identifies names, not because it accuses. It matters because it proves that the questions themselves are legitimate, that the materials exist, that the agencies involved have not answered, not fully, not clearly, not convincingly. Massie didn't accuse Patel of wrongdoing. He didn't assert conspiracies. He simply demonstrated that the story is bigger than the official narrative, and that the people responsible for reviewing the files haven't always done so with the detail they claim. The significance of that cannot be overstated. For years, the Epstein case has been clouded by unanswered questions, half-redacted documents, limited warrants, overlapping jurisdictions, and unexplained gaps. Some of that is bureaucracy, some of it is legal structure, some of it, and many believe, is intentional. But for the first time, a sitting member of Congress put all of those tensions into plain view during a live hearing under oath. Massie didn't need drama to expose the truth. He needed 5 minutes, 4 documents, and the courage to ask questions that everyone else avoids. That's why the clip stayed trending for hours. That's why commentators called it a turning point. That's why Patel's reaction alone, subtle, restrained but unmistakably shaken, became a subject of its own. And this is where the story shifts from what happened to what comes next. Because now that these documents are in the congressional record, now that Patel's admissions are public, now that the authenticity of the questions has been validated, future hearings can build on this foundation. Future committees can cite this moment, journalists can reference it, legal teams can analyze it, and victims, for the first time in years, have a public official openly acknowledging the existence of questions others pretend do not exist. This is not the end. It is the beginning of a new phase, one where silence is no longer plausible and avoidance is no longer sustainable. If you've made it this far, you see why this moment matters. You see why a 5-minute exchange shook an entire city. And you understand why the coming weeks are going to bring developments nobody expected. So make sure you're here when they do. Like this video so more people see it. Subscribe to this channel for continuous updates. And turn on notifications, because this is just getting started, and you won't want to miss what happens next.